Truck prices are getting so expensive. GM, Ford, as well as Ram prices are just getting so high. Would you believe $90,000 for this one? This one at $80,000, about $85,000. And this truck here is about $85 and $105. Clearly a lot of vehicles here on the market to choose from. These brands from the Stellantis group, like we're looking at here, of course, Ford, GM, are all ramping up. They've built many more vehicles out there, and it's all in anticipation of the UAW strike. What do you think that means for car prices? Currently, truck prices are high. No questions asked. I've seen trucks here that are over $105,000, $110,000, or some of the specialty trucks here that are way over $150,000 Canadian. Prices are going up, up, up. Why does that happen in the first place? Where do we think it's all going? And as a consumer, do you think you have a place to get a deal yet? Well, let's talk about this from the beginning. Remember way back a couple of short years ago, we had a lot of problems with getting supply. It was all supply and demand. The chips were shortages, couldn't get chips in vehicles. You had skeleton vehicles like this parked on lot. Ford had a lot of that, but all of the big three had trucks that they could not sell because the vehicles were 90% built, but they couldn't put chips and all of the electronics in these vehicles to get them so they were functional. Now it created a bit of a shortage. People were sitting at home. Governments were setting up people with a lot of incentives, unemployment insurance. They were giving benefits as well because of what was actually happening, and people couldn't work. So the government was doling out cash left, right, and center. And people were saying, you know what? Okay, I don't really care so much how much the amount is. The conventional thought process of how people buy vehicles was going out the window because people were getting to the point where they said, you know what? I don't care that the truck's $110,000. I just care what the monthly payment is. So all of a sudden, banks were helping facilitate these changes. Banks were a big part of the big catalyst as to why some of these changes were happening. Banks were a big part of the problem because now instead of being a conventional 3, 4, 5-year loan, they were extending this out to 7, 8-year loan or beyond. It was almost becoming a mortgage payment for a lot of people, as long as it fit the monthly budget. So that sort of drove prices up because people didn't care as much about the outright number, even though everything tells you historically that that's the worst approach angle to come at when you're buying a vehicle. That's how people were stick handling it because they knew they were getting their monthly paychecks from the government. Even if they were working, people were coming at it from that perspective. Inventory was relatively low, driving prices up, and consumers just seemed to be okay with it. Nobody was loving paying more for a vehicle, but if the banks and some of these other organizations were able to essentially facilitate by dropping your monthly payment, everything was good. People were happy about that. It just got the job done, and these manufacturers were selling cars, trucks, SUVs. Now, with that said, trucks and SUVs, that's the key thing here. If you've looked here, as you look down the line, you'll clearly see lots of trucks and SUVs, Jeeps, we're talking Stellantis, Ford, and the F-150 is a popular model, and GM as well as with some of their 1500 model series vehicles were very popular. What isn't selling so much, and you don't even see many of the four-door cars out here, sedans, the little hatchbacks, all of the big three have elected to basically say bye-bye to those types of products because there's a small profit margin in there and there's not a lot of money to be made. It even got so bad, as a matter of fact, that dealers started even getting lazy. Customers were saying, yes, check all the boxes. The dealer would ask them, would you like paint protection film to protect that paint? Would you like running boards? Or would you like mud guards or even floor mats? How about document fee for $70.99 as well as roof racks you can throw on there? We could also do the spray and box liners for another $2,500, and the list goes on. And manufacturers were basically writing the bill, writing their own check, and buyers were literally sucking it all up like sponges, just saying, as long as it fits my monthly payment, it's all good with me. Should I maybe just keep my old Dodge, put a $3,000 into it, and keep it running for another 50,000 miles? Be better off doing that. Wait it out till all this storm ends with UAW, and then watch prices start to slowly drop back down. Even vehicles like this, normally historically were relatively affordable vehicles, have turned into a relative luxury item because of the sheer cost of what you're having to pay for a modern day Jeep. And a lot of that is just supply and demand. We know that retail on these vehicles is high now, but a lot of it has to do with resale. And after about 3 or 4 years, they're still worth close to what they are brand new. So people are okay overspending for a Jeep product when in fact they know they'll get the money back in the back end. But all that does is continually drive prices up for people that legitimately are looking for, a new or slightly used vehicle they can't afford anymore. And there's always somebody there willing to pay a bit more. When you try to get in there into the dealer, knock on the door, and actually challenge them with a bit of a negotiation, they basically play coy. Things are changing now too with this UAW strike. That's going to create a whole new storm of challenges. Why is that happening? Right now, depending on the UAW strike time frame, a lot of these manufacturers, I've spoken to people in the industry, and it's specifically a few salespeople as well as a couple of general managers that I know of, and they've literally said that's why there's so many vehicles right now, because they've had workers working double time, overtime to actually put more vehicles on the lot in anticipation of the UAW. There's also people I know stocking up their parts department just to make sure that they have material and inventory so they can continue servicing their vehicles too. You want to make sure you have all those parts in place to manage to keep the business running, because if you come up short and there's no way to grab that, supply chain is going to be a big ugly deal. Now, another big part of the problem is you think as a consumer, now with all this extra inventory on the lot, that you're going to be able to get a great deal. But the problem is you probably cannot get a great deal right now. A lot of what's going on is because the unknown and the delayed time frame on how long the strike could go on. A lot of the manufacturers are saying, hey, we don't know what that backlog looks like. We know we have X amount of days on the lot available, but we also don't know where that end date is for this union strike. If this continues on and on and on, we don't want to give you any deals because we've got to maintain that margin. I don't want to hustle out all these vehicles as a general manager and then all of a sudden just selling them on volume rather than actually on profit, and then hitting the end of the road. And if the union continues on or the strike continues on, being snookered in a position where, of course, we have no more product to sell. So they want to sell their vehicles right now, the ones that they've actually got on the lot here. They want to actually sell them for top dollars just so that they're not snookered. So even if they do run out of vehicles in inventory, at least they were able to maximize their value and profit margins, or otherwise gone up in smoke. And then a lot of buyers think that, you know what, I don't worry about it. I'm not in a rush. I'll wait it out for 6 months or 3 months or a year, and that's okay. And then even if they run out of products from, the big three like GM here, we have, or like Dodge or Ram here, or, the Stellantis group, or if they run out in GMs and F-150s, I can always go to Toyota. Well, guess what? Toyota is well in a rough spot, because if you want the Tundra, which is equivalent to size as a lot of these full-size pickup trucks here, you're going to have to wait probably at least 6 months to get the gas, or you're definitely going to have to wait 1.5 to 2 years to get the hybrid version of that Tundra. So it doesn't matter what market you're into. If you're looking for a pickup truck, they'll have their own things that they have to contend with. Now, the used car market as well is even more pressed. There's even more pressure on the used market because the used market does not have the inventory. As people find themselves snookered here, eventually high prices, somebody might walk in there and not say, I don't want to pay $1,200 a month. I don't want to pay $100,000 for a pickup truck. Then they start looking at a 2 or 3 year old pickup truck from these brands, of course, Stellantis, F-150s from Ford, as well as, the GM products. They might start looking at a 2 or 3 year old truck with 60, 80,000 miles on it and say, hey, that's good enough for me. That truck will last a long time. The sad part is everybody else is thinking the exact same thing. Not everybody wants to pay that top shelf dollar, so they're probably going to start looking at the used market. Used market's taking a hit right now. Same thing with Toyota. We know the RAV4s, we know the Highlanders, especially where you're talking about specifically vehicles that have the hybrid. They're almost impossible to get. You're talking about 1.5 to 2 years out for any of their hybrid vehicles. Even the gas jobbies, you're probably 6 months to a year out. So even buying a Toyota SUV is going to be a challenge in the next little while, and the manufacturers aren't giving this stuff away. Toyota's, of course, just-in-time sales, whereas GM not so much. Dodge, Ram, Stellantis clearly are going more based on, hey, maximizing profit. It's a big vehicle. We're going to get a lot of money out of this. But consumers are going to pay a lot for a new truck or a used. But could it actually be that some of these big manufacturers are now going to be screwed? Are they going to be able to sell these vehicles? Because now, as we're hitting a place, we're almost dive bombing into a recession. Look across Canada, United States, we're in a place where, vehicles at auctions are going up higher priced. The small little corner car lots are dealing on the same used products that get traded in. When somebody buys one of these new vehicles, they're trading in their used vehicle. And of course, those used ones now in the auctions are going for top dollar, because if it's worth even owning, the car dealers are fighting like a frenzy, like piranhas on a piece of meat, trying to get that last great model. So that's going to be a challenge, getting a decent price on the used car market too. Now, vehicles like Lexus and Toyotas are going to be a challenge because Toyota is just-in-time delivery. And the problem with that brand is that they're not going to sell their cars cheap on the used car market because they know of the shortages. And Toyota is basically selling their used vehicles, SUVs, cars, especially the hybrids, at least par. So if they have a 2-year-old vehicle with 40,000, 30,000 miles on it, there's a good possibility they're going to ask even more than the brand new vehicle version of it. So good luck on trying to get your hands on a slightly used Toyota product. It's going to be top dollar. You're better off definitely buying brand new. So now, unfortunately, with inflation on the rise and interest rates are through the roof and people on the verge of losing their homes, people are just taking the backseat approach. I'm not in a rush. What does that leave all the manufacturers doing now as the tables are turning? Now, this perfect storm might in fact leave the manufacturers in a place where they literally can't sell trucks, cars, SUVs, because they're not putting out cars. They're not even selling those because of low profit margins, and the trucks and SUVs are priced up too high. It's almost at the point where the breaking point. You know, a lot of people just can't afford to make those payments anymore or buy that vehicle outright. So that could in fact be a problem for the big three, and as a result, they may not be able to sell a new truck.